Hey everyone, in today's video, I'm going to be going over what I believe is one of the best strength builds you can use, not just in terms of damage, but also being very easy to manage and having different weapons to choose from, so you got a variety here that all result in the same ending. You just squishing anybody in front of you with just a few hits if even. But anyways, let's actually get into the build now, and we'll start off with the first variation of it, the Greatsword. This thing is spectacular, having an A rating in strength when you apply the heavy variation to it, which obviously we're going to do that because it scales off of strength and this is a strength focused build, so it only makes sense. On top of that, the moveset it has is also really solid, with its light attack being able to hit multiple enemies fairly quickly, its rolling slash crouching attack, which honestly I kind of think it's one of the best moves in the game because it's so fast and instant, but the thing that makes it really powerful is because the sword is so long, you can usually hit enemies before they even get close enough to swing at you. Or if you're playing in PvP, it's just really easy to roll catch people with this because, again, it's absolutely massive. Then the heavy attack on it is pretty much the same thing as a light attack, but obviously, you know, it takes a longer time to charge up, but it does more damage as well. Before I continue on with the build, I do want to give a big thanks to the sponsors of this video. Raid Shadow Legends, one of the most popular mobile games out there. And if you guys haven't heard of them, it's either one, you've been asleep for a couple of years, or this is your first time watching a gaming video. But not to worry, I'm going to tell you what they're all about. Choose from hundreds of champions, almost an endless selection, so you're bound to find some guys you're really going to love. Once you got your team together, it's time to make them more powerful, and you can do that by upgrading their gear and also leveling up their skills, which I think is absolutely amazing. Then you can head into the Doom Tower. This huge tower is actually a prison. The Arbiter fought a pack of really nasty bad guys a long time ago, but she wasn't strong enough to take them out for good. So instead, she locked them up in a massive super tower until she figured out how to deal with them. Well, it's also been a few thousand years or something, and there's still a Doom Tower, so I guess we know how that went. What's worse, now that Sephiroth is leaking back into the world, the Arbiter doesn't have enough power to keep the wards up. So the Doom Tower is slowly falling apart, and it's up to us to get in there and knock some heads around before they get out. To climb to the top, you're going to need an army of champions. The regular Doom Tower floors tend to be pretty easy to deal with if you've just got a strong team, but the bosses are really tough and you need some serious specialists if you're going to beat them. You'll generally want ways to remove debuffs, and you'll also want some pretty high resistance. Lots of Doom Tower bosses ignore block debuffs, and they can do some really nasty stuff to your champions, like draining their turn meters or stripping their buffs. A couple of bosses need specific mechanics to beat them, like the Scarab King. He takes barely any damage unless you reduce his max HP, and if you attack him without a shield buff on, he'll wreck your entire team really fast. And there's a couple of things that really stand out for me in this game, one of them being the amount of detail they put into every champion. Also, this month Raid just released a giant new feature called Awakening and a brutal new dungeon, the Iron Twins Fortress. If you're good enough to take down the Iron Twins, you'll see a huge payoff. Being able to awaken your champions, this lets you choose a powerful blessing that can transform how they perform in battle. I love how awesome some of these blessings look, and there's so much variety, like you just never run out. This whole feature has added an entire new level of depth and strategy, and I've been having a ton of fun playing around and testing things out. But that's not the end of it either. Raid just released a superpower legendary version of everyone's favorite champion, the Death Knight. The whole Raid community has been waiting for this for a long time, and Ultimate Death Knight is literally everything we've wanted. He's poised, he's powerful, he's just perfect. That's the best way to describe it. And the best part is everyone can get him for free, just by logging in. All you have to do is log in, play Raid for 7 days between now and October 27th, and you'll get the Ultimate Death Knight added to your collection. Just like that, easy and simple. There's seriously never been a better time to get started. You can also use the code DKRISES for a bunch of free items to instantly level up your new strongest champion all the way up to level 50 5-star Ascension. And if you haven't started playing Raid yet, click my link in the description down below or scan my QR code here on screen. You'll get unique bonuses worth $30. We're talking a free epic champion Tyrell, 200k silver, 1 energy refill, 1 XP boost, and 1 ancient shard so you can summon awesome champions as soon as you get in the game. These rewards are only going to be available for the next 30 days, so you better get moving. Big thanks to the sponsors of this video, I really appreciate the opportunity that they've given me. But now, let's continue on with the build. Now with its Ash of War, we're gonna go with Royal Knight's Resolve, which just increases the damage of a single attack by a ridiculous amount. And when we combine this with our charged heavy attack, we don't only just bring enemies down extremely quickly with a lot of damage, but it's a charged heavy attack. It breaks their poise really easily. So this is just gonna lead us up to landing more critical hits on stronger enemies or bosses, while we're also doing a crazy amount of damage with our heavy attacks. So when we combo these two together, we're basically gonna melt bosses pretty quickly. And one talisman that really complements this playstyle is the Axe Talisman. This is just gonna increase the damage of our charged heavy attacks by an extra 10%. So when it comes to regular enemies, just use the sword's regular basic attacks because that's pretty much all you'll need to get rid of them. Then with stronger level enemies or bosses, that's when you really want to use Royal Knight's Resolve and use your charged heavy attacks because that's going to end the fight insanely fast. Lastly, for the greatswords, I figured I'd add a little bit of extra spice to it by making them completely overkill, and that's by adding the Ruin's Greatsword in our offhand. Honestly, the only use for this thing is just for its special attack, because when we power stance this, it's only going to help us with killing weaker level enemies, which we don't really need help with because they're weaker level enemies. So the special attack is going to come really clutch against mobile bosses because landing a heavy attack does take a little bit of time, and if the enemy you're fighting is constantly jumping around, you're going to have a little bit of difficulty with that. So the attack offers decent range with a good size area of effect, so it's going to be pretty easy to land this consistently on bosses. Now the one downside to it is it doesn't do as much damage as a fully charged heavy attack, but I think that's perfectly okay because the trade-off for it is we have a ranged attack now. You can also slap on the Shard of Alexander to boost its damage by an extra 15%. And what's really nice about this is it also applies to our other Ash of War, Royal Knight's Resolve, boosting that damage as well. So that covers everything for the greatsword setup, so now let's move on to our last weapon, which is going to be our hardest hitting weapon, the Giant Crusher. This thing is absolutely ridiculous. It has an S rating in strength, so it's going to give us the most damage possible with our strength build, and this thing hits harder than our greatsword. The only drawback to this is it does take a little bit longer to charge up your heavy attack or even swing your light attack, and you also don't get the range that the greatsword offers. But again, you are going to be doing a bit more damage. Now with its Ash of War, we are going to be going with Royal Knight's Resolve again, being used in the exact same way as the greatsword. Charge up those heavy attacks and let it rip for some ridiculous damage. So it doesn't really matter if you choose to use the Giant Crusher, a single Colossal Sword, 2 Colossal Swords, you're going to be doing the same thing in the end, killing bosses fairly easily and really quickly as well. I do want to add that I am also using the Ritual Sword Talisman as my third talisman slot, which isn't absolutely needed just because there isn't anything else I found to really help me out as much. Like you can very easily go and grab something that's going to increase your armor, your poise, your health, your mana, like anything else. It's not needed because all it does is it increases our damage by 10% when we're at max health though. And oftentimes you'll see me trading hits with bosses, so I'm not always going to be at max health receiving that 10% damage bonus. It only really helps out for probably the initial hit, and that's about it. Lastly, before I go over the armor and the minimum stats required, we still have one way of increasing our damage, and that's with the Flask of Wondrous Physic. The best 2 tiers you'll want to use with this is the Strength Crystal Knot, which is going to increase our strength by 10 levels for 3 minutes, which in turn is just going to increase the damage of all of our weapons because they all scale really well with strength. Then the other one, we're going to go with the Spiked Crack tier. This one is just going to increase the damage of our charged heavy attacks by an extra 15% for 3 minutes as well. Now since both of these tiers do last for 3 minutes, I'm going to recommend you just use the flask literally whenever, because 3 minutes is more than enough time to kill any boss in the game with this setup, and it's also a really good amount of time to get you at least halfway or 2/3 of the way to the nearest bonfire to refill it at. So that covers everything for the offensive stuff. Now let's hop into the armor. Now you're probably thinking, why does this guy look like Master Chief? And this is just a cosmetic mod I placed on it just because I like the look of it. It doesn't affect the stats, the weight of it, none of that. All it does is just change the visual appearance, and that's about it. That's also why all the footage I'm using is filmed in single player, because if you try to go online with any mods, you're gonna get banned. But If you do choose to use this mod, I'm going to put a link in the description down below for anybody that wants to use it. Again, you can't play online with it, just single player. But anyways, the second main reason I'm going with this armor set, the BRIAR set, is because it's a medium tier armor. It's not lightweight armor, so you're not going to be able to save as many points in endurance, but the trade-off with lightweight armor is when you do end up trading hits with bosses or enemies, you're going to notice you're taking a lot more damage because lighter armor does offer less protection. Then if you choose to go the opposite route, grabbing some of the heaviest armor in the game, yes, you are going to take barely any damage in the end, but the trade-off for it is you're going to have to put so many points into endurance, it's really going to cripple the build because, again, we are going to be using the Giant Crusher, which is extremely heavy, 1 Colossal Sword or even 2 Colossal Swords, and that's just a ton of weight to go with heavy armor. And this is also including us using the GREATSWORD's Arsenal Talisman, which is going to increase our max equip load by 19%. So the trade-off isn't worth it, sacrificing points in strength for our damage and points in vigor for our health just to increase our max equip load to wear heavier armor. Lastly, we got the minimum stats required. You'll need at least 60 strength, 12 dex, and 16 intelligence to use all the weapons effectively. Afterwards, I'd recommend putting majority of your points into strength just to increase your damage, endurance to increase your max equip load so you can wear some heavier armor like the BRIAR set, and vigor just to increase your max health since there are going to be times where we do end up trading hits with enemies. So that covers everything for this build, and before I end the video off with just more gameplay, I do want to thank the members of my channel for supporting me on my videos and the future ones to come. Thanks everybody for watching, and hopefully I see you all in the next one.